many of you guys ever driven on a road, I mean, especially here in Texas, because there's a lot of churches. And in this one road, you see like 5 different churches. And you're like, what the heck? They're taking up too much space. Why can't they just go to one church? And then you start paying attention. So that's a Lutheran, that's a Methodist, that's a Baptist, and that's a Catholic. And now you're like, that's a lot of big words. What do they do? What's the difference? Is that just the name of the church, or is that something else? Yeah, it is something else, right? These are all different denominations in the Christian faith. So to the outside eye, they're gonna start thinking, well, can you really trust Christianity? It's so fragmented. I've heard people say that you can't trust Christianity because there are too many Christian churches. At the core of the faith, for Christians, we understand some things. And we all agree that Jesus is God. Jesus died for our sins. He rose on the 3rd day. We believe in the Holy Trinity. And there's just a whole other list that I think would be pretty interesting to say for its own video. But there are differences in how denominations operate. But at the very core, we all understand some very basic truths about Christianity, like I stated before. What I'm going to talk about in this video is more to do with how the Catholic Church is very different than the Protestant Church. And although there's a lot of reasons and I can't cover it now, and I probably don't have the knowledge to actually cover these things, I'm learning myself too. I want to talk about one verse that for a lot of hundreds of years was very well understood to mean a specific thing and a very concrete thing. And after some time, people started questioning the validity of this claim. So a little context. Protestants don't have a church structure, and they claim no authority to the church. I know that there's some Protestant denominations, such as Anglicans and Episcopals, that do have systems of authority within the church. And you get to the extreme where the Baptists, it's like, no authority. Like, whereas the Catholic Church, we have like this very, very extensive tradition that's built around the Catholic Church. We believe that the Catholic Church is one of the highest authorities in our faith, and just for starters, the Bible was put together by the church. If the church has no authority, neither does the Bible, and we believe the Bible to have authority over our faith. Right, so Jesus put together these very clear descriptions of the church, and even in Matthew, he said that when a believer is doing something incorrectly, you get together with someone else and you bring him to the church, and if he doesn't change, well, let him be gone. So there is validity in the claim that a church has authority in the Christian faith. But we have very strong disagreements with Protestants. So what I'm going to talk about today has to do with this idea that the church is divided from the Catholics and the Protestants, and we're going to be talking about one verse that talks about Peter's leadership role in the early church. This verse is Matthew 16:18, and it reads, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." To someone who really doesn't care about Christianity or the Bible, they hear this and it's interchangeable with any other verse in the Bible. They're like, okay, cool, it's just a verse. But for someone who is interested and kind of starts to grapple around the meaning of this verse, you start thinking, wow, I guess this is very consequential to the whole concept or the whole conversation of Catholics claiming that they have a pope. It's all about Peter being renamed. There's 12 disciples, and in the Bible, St. Peter always comes out at the start of the names of the disciples, and he is mentioned the most amount of times in the Bible. And we know that the order of naming and how many times he appears in the Bible is important because, for example, when they name all the 12 disciples, the least important one, the one who betrayed Jesus, is always named at the end. I mean, that also must mean that the person they name the most and the person who comes up at the front of the list is the most important, St. Peter. So here we have Jesus, who only renames people when he's going to assign them a very important task. He renames Simon, right, one of his 12 disciples, to Peter. That in Greek, well, I didn't cover this before, which is actually pretty interesting. Almost every Christian shares the same New Testament that is written in Greek. We have different understandings of the Old Testament. It's not necessarily different understandings. It's just that there's the Old Testament that we all accept, but Protestants don't accept something called the Apocrypha, and we understand that this is biblical, and we call it the Deuterocanonical books. I butchered that. The important thing that we're covering right now is that Peter, or Simon, was renamed to Peter. In Greek, Peter is Petros, right? And a couple words later, actually, Jesus said that I will build my church on this rock. And in Greek, that word is Petras. So let me explain this. Like I said, Jesus only renames people when he's going to give them a very important task in their lives. Basically, they're taking on this new mission, and this new mission has a name to it. For Simon, he became Peter, St. Peter. And I think it's no coincidence that just before he renamed Peter, he also mentioned that on a rock he's going to build his church. Now, let's go to Greek, because it is actually where the important conversation is. Or the disciple Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew, which is Matthew 16:18, or Matthew 16:18 is included in there. He wrote that he renamed Simon to Peter, or Petros. And Petros is a masculine noun commonly used at that time to not address objects, but address male people. And right after that, Jesus says, I'm going to build my church on this Petra. Petra is a feminine noun, almost never used to address humans, females. It was almost always used to address rocks, right? Rock formations. Now the disagreement starts. Oh yeah, Jesus built the church on a rock, a cliff. He was talking about a cliff. And he named Peter because he wants to showcase that Peter is just a small rock, right? Because Petros was used to designate smaller rocks, while Petras was used to designate larger rocks, as I said before. So Petros was a smaller rock, and Jesus was this big rock. And that's true, but Jesus was a cornerstone, not just any rock. He was the cornerstone who held the church together. The rock Jesus was addressing in Matthew 16:18 was Peter. So the biggest claim to this is that Jesus didn't speak English, Jesus didn't speak Greek, Jesus actually spoke Aramaic. So if we want to challenge this conversation, we have to address it in Aramaic. And Aramaic is this very old language, and it's studied mainly with a biblical perspective. What would have Jesus said to Peter in this conversation? Well, it wouldn't have been, I name you Petros, and I will build my church on this Petra. Actually, what he used was Cephas for Peter and Kepha for the rock he built the church on. But why is this, right? So now you go one step more. So you go from English to Greek, right? In English, it's Peter and then the rock. Very not so connected, right? But then you go to Greek and it's, okay, now you have Petros and Petra. Petra, feminine noun, small, all larger rock. And then you have Petros, masculine noun, smaller rock. But Jesus didn't speak these languages. One step further, we go to Aramaic. In Aramaic, Jesus said Cephas and Kepha. Now, what do these words mean? Well, objects are addressed as either feminine or masculine. Same thing in Aramaic. And just like in Spanish, there's a lot of different words for the same thing. So was there in Aramaic. And actually in Aramaic, for rock, there was around like 16 different words or different pronunciations of the same word that all meant rock. And it so happened to be that the more popular designator for a rock was a feminine noun instead of a masculine noun. So when Jesus was talking about a rock, he was obviously going to choose the feminine noun because it was a popular one. So like, I guess an example would be you're going down the street and right now the colloquial way to address a car is a car. It's like, I see a car. It'd be kind of odd if you said, oh, there goes an automobile, a red automobile. Some people say it, but it's not very common, right? And the same thing would have happened in Aramaic. Jesus could have named Peter Kepha, but Kepha was a feminine noun. Peter was obviously a male. Jesus chose the male version of rock, which was a lot less common, Cephas, and he named Peter Cephas. In the end, these two words have the exact same meaning. But yeah, Cephas is Kephas. You jump to Greek, Petros, Petra, and then you jump to Peter, rock. Peter is the rock Jesus built a church on, and Jesus is the cornerstone of that church. He holds it together. Kind of like imagine that Jesus is the king of the church. Someone crashed outside, I heard. Jesus is the king of the church, and the Pope is like the prime minister. Kind of like that. I guess that's a good way of explaining it. This video is probably gonna suck. It's my first YouTube video, and I've been recording for like 30 minutes trying to say everything, and I don't even know if I said all the stuff I need to say. Did I even read Matthew 16:18? I don't know. But I hope y'all have a great day.